Hey. Yoo-hoo. Simon, thank you so much for being here. Jeremy, are you getting the laptop up here or not? Can we start? Okay. All right, Simon, we can see you and you can hear us. Is that correct?
Yes, I cannot see anyone, but
Okay,
maybe that's just how it goes.
he's working on that. If it's all right,
Okay,
we'll start because it's getting later.
sure,
And
that's fine.
okay, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Jeremy, Simon is here. He was our wonderful um, what he's a junior, no, sophomore at
Sophomore.
Stone College, and he went on a international studies trip um, called the Global Semester to 4 different countries last fall. And this is about his part time in Costa Rica. But Simon, you can clarify all that.
Yeah. Can
Thanks for
you,
being here.
yeah, do you see the like Zoom screen on the shared screen as well, or can you just see my presentation?
Oh. Both.
Okay, so do you see this image that I'm moving around on the bottom right? Is that in the way? Can you see that?
No, here it's a split screen. We see the
Oh,
pictures and
perfect.
you.
Okay, so I think I have something up that you can't. So that's perfect. That you can't see. Okay. Well, if you're ready, I can get started then.
Yep, go for it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Simon. I have been going to St. John since I was little. But now I am a sophomore at St. Olaf College, where I study environmental studies and political science. And as Bethany mentioned, I was abroad this past fall on a program called Global Semester. And this is my class right here. So we have the way Global Semester works is there are 20 students who travel together. We go to 4 different countries. So we were in Costa Rica, South Africa, Namibia, and Japan. We took one class in each continent, and we traveled with a professor, Dan Hoffrenning, who's in the left side of this photo, and then his wife also got to come along with. So we take a class in each country, and then our professor also teaches one throughout the whole kind of experience. That's kind of the lens that I bring. Oh, looks like oh, never mind. Jeremy's changing the camera. There we go. Okay, perfect. Now I can see people. Hello. Um, yeah, so global is really cool because we get to travel to a lot of different places, and we're kind of in a lot, like for example in Costa Rica we were at farms, we went to different museums. I stayed with a host family and kind of all over the place in the country, a lot of different opportunities of both speaking with like experts and also just people around the community. So that's kind of my experience in Costa Rica and kind of what I bring in my understanding of this. So what I thought I was going to do is I will just kind of explain a little bit about some of our experiences on global. I think that's kind of fun to see. I'll show you some photos of some animals and birds and plants that we saw in Costa Rica, and then I can also go a little bit more into how Costa Rica thinks about ecotourism and maybe how we are able to understand travel in a country like Costa Rica as a American coming in with kind of a different, more privileged position and what that looks like. So that's my plan. Feel free to interrupt if you have any questions throughout, or else we can also, I'm happy to answer more questions at the end. Yeah, so to get started, this is my group of from Global Semester starting on in the first this was our second day together, I believe. So we had a lot of group photos, and then this was our first one. Um, yeah, so this is global right here in kind of a nutshell. We had a lot of in Costa Rica, we spent a lot of time walking through the jungle and the rainforest. This photo on the left, we're all wearing rain jackets. It was both very humid and very rainy at the same time. So it was pretty consistently in the 80s or 90s, but it was about 100% humidity and would rain many times a day. So that was a new experience for me coming from Fargo. I'd never been in a rainforest environment before. Um, and this person on the right here is named Emmy. So she was our teacher in Costa Rica. She taught a class for us on sustainable development. And most of our time, most of our whole class in Costa Rica was taught by her. She's a biologist by training, but she was also working with us just kind of on sustainability in general. Um, Here, I think she's pulling a spider web and was showing us a spider, which was a common thing where we were always on different walks and things. And we would take maybe we would go a half a mile, and it would take us 45 minutes because we would stop and see things every 10 feet. So she was a very knowledgeable guide for us, which was really cool. Here's kind of a few just fun experiences on Global. So on the left, this is one of my friends, Jake. He and I stayed with a host family. Everybody was split up for about 4 days and stayed with host families in Monteverde, which is a city in Costa Rica that is often known for some kind of ecotourism and a lot of really cool natural opportunities in the area. So that was a host family experience I got to have living with a country or a family in Costa Rica. And then on the right here, we also have kind of fun events. So this was someone's birthday, and we get to celebrate those things too. We have lots of milestones and Thanksgiving and things like that that also happened while we were abroad, because we're gone for 3.5 months. So it's quite a journey as a group of students to take together. These are some of the different places we stayed. On the left is La Selva, which is a place that Dennis and Diane I know have been to. I'm not sure if there's anyone else in the audience that's been there. Um, and it is kind of a research station that has both opportunities for tourists to come and kind of experience what the rainforest is like. Also, people who are um, studying, doing different research projects. Actually, when we were there, the BBC, I believe, was there and or National Geographic, and there was like a whole film crew, and they were out all day filming things in the rainforest. That was pretty cool to know that I was in a place where, um, like the National Geographic Channel would go to film the jungle, and that was where we were. So that was really interesting. And then on the right here, this is in Monteverde, the biological station there. So this is kind of um, a good sense of the type of places we would stay. So right here we have a large kind of main building that had a lot of. Oftentimes we'd be in a place where there's a breakfast area, and we would eat all our meals together from the kitchen, and then there'd be different like a kind of study area as well as space for sleeping and like a living room. So we stayed in a lot of different areas. Some like in La Selva where it's big bunk rooms, other times in hotels. But we were really all over the place. I don't think I ever stayed in Costa Rica. I don't think I ever stayed for in the same place for more than maybe 6 days. So we were always moving around over the course of our about a month there. Um, Also, we get a lot of really cool opportunities on Global to meet with people that you wouldn't have the same opportunity as when you are a student. So this is a photo of us here with Oscar Arias, who is the former president of Costa Rica. This was a pretty crazy experience to have. Our professor Dan was just kind of constantly emailing him, and eventually he just said yes. So we got the opportunity to meet with the former president, which was a pretty powerful experience that not many people get to have. So I was really really grateful for that opportunity. Yeah. All right, moving on. I think I will explain a little bit about some of my experience going around Costa Rica, what things we see that kind of point towards focus on biodiversity and sustainability, um, and some of the good things about that, and also some of the challenges that that might reflect as well, and how we can kind of understand Costa Rica beyond and traveling in places that are highlighting ecotourism, how we can understand that beyond just the art that's out or things like that. So I thought this would be a good place to start. Walking around the city of San Jose, which is the capital city, there was a lot of different decisions that were made that made it clear that they're kind of prioritizing sustainability. So, for example, here we had a lot of art pieces, which kind of stuck out to me. This building in the middle is from the University of Costa Rica. This is one of I think it's their library, and it's just got this very large art piece on the front, which was cool. And then you can also see these paintings on the left and right. We're not uncommon to see around our time in Costa Rica, and they were often just kind of alluding to different natural resources or features of Costa Rica, and that was kind of interesting because it it created this sense of sustainability and like the prioritization of sustainability. Um, Also, the University of Costa Rica, we did a walking tour there, and it was really notable the kind of changes that they're able to make to prioritize sustainability. One of the things that they did was prioritizing green corridors and allowing different natural species to be able to flow through this space instead of having the university, instead of having it divide the community, it was able to kind of allow animals to continue through the area. Um, this photo on the right here is at the University of Costa Rica. And actually, right in this section of trees here was a place where we actually saw sloths. It was one of the only places in San Jose where sloths still remain. But that was a really interesting experience to be in the middle of a very big urban area, but also experience something and see animals that are normally you would kind of imagine, or we saw in other places, other nature preserves and things like that. Um, Also on the left here, this was just a park in Costa Rica that we went to one of our first days. I think it's a good example of how lush everything is. I think you can see how green this grass is. And throughout our time, it was like very apparent how green everything was. There was a lot of rain. And the kind of abundance of life was really interesting to see. And then this photo in the middle here is from the OTS office, so the Organization for Tropical Studies was the group who ran our study abroad program in Costa Rica. And this is a section of their building design. It's a little hard to tell, but there's actually a hole in the ceiling, and they allow water to flow into the building and to allow kind of plants to be watered. And so it was a really interesting way of incorporating, instead of like dividing ourselves from nature, it allowed it to kind of go into our spaces and be an addition versus kind of forcing it away in a typical building design, which would not have an open roof in that way. And so those are kind of some little things that were done to allow just the inclusion of uh, nature and a connection to nature throughout public spaces, which I think is interesting. I'm going to move on here to kind of another, I guess, key experience of our time in Costa Rica was just the biodiversity in general. We saw a lot of different birds. We have a sloth here. I think this was from La Selva. The photo on the right, you can see it's a little hard to tell, but there's vines that are growing up this tree. And I was always just really struck by the amount of natural growth and vegetation that would exist in these places was really interesting. Um, a lot of really cool mushrooms and fungus here you can see on the left. Some very small mushrooms, very big ones as well in other places. We have a frog here and a spider as well. And these were things that it felt like we would just we were walking through, we'd been walking for just 30 seconds and we would come across things like this. And the abundance of biodiversity was really quite striking. So that was really interesting for me to experience. We have some more photos here. This photo on the right, it's a little hard to tell, but that is the part of the tree that I'm hugging there is just the root. So that's like the root system. And that there was a lot of trees like that that were just huge. And they have these really strong bases. We have another frog here as well. This was on a night hike. We were able to get this really cool photo with a flashlight behind the leaf. And we have a snake here, and then this photo on the left is kind of another way of seeing how much like moisture and just quantity of rain goes through these areas. The amount of moss that is growing was really saturated in water, and that was very yeah, it was interesting seeing how the amount of water that this place experiences really causes and allows biodiversity to thrive, which was interesting. Now, kind of connecting to a lot of travelers' experience in Costa Rica, I think ecotourism is a really main kind of focus for Costa Rica. It's really grown their economy and allowed a lot of opportunity for both connection to nature and giving kind of economic growth in general. And that is impossible because of the abundance of biodiversity in Costa Rica. What is there is very in a very high concentration in comparison to a lot of other places in the world, which is really interesting. So here's a few of the different kind of ecotourism opportunities that we took part in that I'll just kind of explain a little more. On the left, this is from La Selva. So it's a research station where we did a lot of our hiking, and this is kind of a classic bridge here. So you can, I hope you can see there's some monkeys here that are walking on the bridge, and then we're standing on the end, and they would just walk over the bridge when they wanted. And it was a really, this feature was cool because the bridge goes over a big river, and you're able to be kind of up in the jungle canopy and looking into the trees, and we would see different lizards and snakes and monkeys and things like that just right off of the bridge, which was cool. And then in the middle here, we have a chocolate farm where we got to see the whole process of drying the beans and tasting them in different forms. And then on the right, this is at a coffee farm in Monteverde. We did some work in adding composting and like composting different organic materials and adding that into the soil, also kind of making biofertilizer and what that looks like, how we can use different natural leftovers and different scraps and what things crops can also be grown to kind of support this coffee farm. So that was a really really interesting experience and kind of a something that abounds all over Costa Rica. There's a lot of opportunities to experience this ecotourism, and I think there's some kind of good and bad in that. So I'll kind of get into that a little more later. Um, One of the things I want to highlight with this ecotourism is that there's also some overlooked issues in it. So, for example, here, this actually was a really good opportunity. We went to a pineapple farm, and so you can see here, these are the pineapples are growing on the left in this left image, and they grow kind of under right at the base by the soil, and then there's the stalk going up. And then this photo in the center is what is actually planted. So they were able to cut that off and then replant it in the soil to grow other pineapples. And so we got to try some pineapples on this plantation. But something like this is interesting because as a tourist, we're able to kind of come in and experience how, wow, it's so cool to see that these pineapples are growing here and to try them. But it's also easy to miss the impact that this production has on the country. Costa Rica uses I was doing a little research to check my numbers again. They use about 22 and a half kilograms of pesticides per hectare of crops. The US in comparison is only 2.5. That's about 10 times as much pesticide usage per acre for Costa Rica in comparison to the US. And I think we really think about the US as being high in um, like a lot of pesticides. And so it's interesting to notice how some of these countries we can go into a place like this and we can experience a pineapple tour and we can see how wow it's cool that these pineapples are growing here and we can try it, but we can forget the fact that the uh, pesticides are needed to allow that to happen. So I think that's something that we worked on in Global is how can we experience these different opportunities and understand the um, many different just understand the place that we're in and experience it, but also understand the implications of that and what are we supporting by going on a tour like this or not, and how do we understand the products that we buy, the pineapples that I buy now in the U.S. afterwards, knowing the implication that that has on the biodiversity that we get to experience. Um, the way I'll kind of, I think, just end this with this is with a few reflections that I've kind of had on intentional travel in general. Our time in Costa Rica really allowed us to experience the biodiversity and understand how diverse of a country it is and see this natural beauty, which is really special. It's something that in the U.S. I think we are more limited from. There's less connection to the natural world, and we have a little bit more separation. And Costa Rica was really a country that did a good job of allowing us to kind of connect these things and does a good job of um, blending the natural world with the kind of human-made world. But it's also important to understand the impacts of prioritizing that. For example, even just housing. I spoke to someone in Monteverde who is a host for Airbnbs, and Airbnbs are a great opportunity and a great way to allow us to experience Costa Rica for a fairly you can cook your own meals and stay in your place in a very comfortable manner. But it also brings a big challenge to communities. It forces the people that are living in these cities out of them because of the higher housing prices of from Airbnb. So it's important to kind of consider some of those things as well. There's just general implications of tourists. Some towns that we were in, we were not there in the peak season, so we were able to see how much space there was and how much space would fill up. We went to a lot of restaurants that were essentially empty or would even close in the time that we were there because there was so few tourists. But the amount of restaurants that was around made it clear that there is really a big influx of tourists in certain seasons and the stress that that can put on communities. Um, so I don't know if we necessarily determined how it's possible to travel in these ways without having any impact. I think it is in a certain way unavoidable. But the way that I've kind of learned to understand this is that although there are is this really cool biodiversity and this really cool opportunity to experience Costa Rica, it's also important to understand what the implications are of our actions in this area and think about how we can make different choices with our money when we're traveling to support businesses that allows uh, businesses and nonprofits and different organizations that allow the community to also be connected to this biodiversity. If we go to kind of just the big main attractions, it kind of forces away the citizens of Costa Rica. It doesn't allow them to be experiencing this thing because Americans are able to pay higher prices. Um, and so it's just important to, I think, to be mindful of that. And that's kind of was our experience. Um, I will say this ecotourism does place a additional incentive on protecting the environment and does have a lot of really good things. The economic growth that it's created for Costa Rica, the level of protection for forests has gone up significantly. They have 100% renewable energy. A lot of those things are possible because of the tourists that are coming. So I do think it's important for us to, it's not that we shouldn't be traveling in these places, but it's important for us to understand how we are traveling and the implications on communities. So yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions on global, on sustainability, on Costa Rica in general. Um, yeah, curious to
So
hear what people think.
I have a question. So it's good to be, like you said, mindful that our traveling has impacts, but how do we lessen those impacts or make them more positive than negative then? Do you have like specifics that we can like be aware of? Like you said, not go to the big things. Is that something or,
Hmm.
you know,
I think it's important to understand the type of yeah, the type of place that we're going to. It's possible to go to a pineapple farm and experience that, but not go to a place that tells us the downsides of this as well. The pineapple farm that we went to was a place that d didn't use any pesticides, and suffers a kind of financial not loss from that, but it's harder for them to make a profit because they use different organic practices. So thinking about what kind of places are we supporting? Are we going to a big farm that just takes us to the pineapple plantation and lets us try it and see how they grow and explains about the process? Or are we going to a farm that recognizes, hey, our country is really struggling. We have a really big demand from the US for pineapples, but the way that we meet that is through high pesticide use. This is a small place that is allowing a more sustainable practice to exist. So, what kind of places are making those practices? And then I guess I will also say, in regards to the challenge on communities in general, I think the importance of using large transit systems helps a lot. If there's ways that we can um, reduce our dependency on using cars in these areas, how can we use public transit? There's often a lot of bus systems. What does that look like? How can we walk? And just how can we make certain choices to minimize the impact and the kind of congestion that's created from tourists? Um, yeah, I don't know how specific that is, but there's a few ideas there.
thank you. Oh, Dennis.
Yeah, hello, Simon. This is Dennis, and thank you so much for joining and sharing your experiences. This has just been a particular treat for me. And I appreciate you did allude to the reality that even Costa Rica has some significant environmental challenges. And one of the questions I was thinking about is so what really has put Costa Rica on the road to this kind of more sustainable development? What really got things going to give it this reputation of being such a great ecotourism destination?
I think it was kind of a compounding effect. I don't. We spoke with when we spoke with Oscar Arias, the former president. We talked about this and a kind of intentional shift at a. I think it was in either the late '90s or the early 2000s to kind of change to put the economy, put a focus on tourists. There's a lot of specific changes that have been made now to allow tourism to exist, and that for example, they have like a police force that is dedicated to like the tourism police, and that is like supporting tourists, and they're either, I guess, if they're causing crime or experiencing crime, they're dedicated to supporting that. And so I think by prioritizing tourism and putting that as a main focus for Costa Rica, it allows them to take the extra step to prioritize sustainability in general. This is something that I was wrestling with when I was there. A lot of the changes that were being made felt like things that are possible in the US. But I think one of the reasons that they're not, and the reason that they can be in Costa Rica, is the fact that they are it's financially incentivized. It is really worth it, and it's a clear profit that can be made for these businesses. If you have a farm where you're raising some cattle, it's pretty easy to no longer raise cattle and allow the land to kind of shift back to a more natural state. and then create a tourist attraction out of that. And that really can bring in a lot of money. And so I think by doing that, it allows them to prioritize preserving nature in a way that we don't. When we think about profits in the US, they're more focused on, if we think about agriculture, for example, there's little incentive to take your large farm field and transition that to something else, because there's no profit there aside from the like kind of more niche demand for a more organic product. In Costa Rica, that's really that's also a tourism thing, and so I think that's the extra step which allows it to exist.
One of the things that has struck me so much is the amount of forest regeneration in Costa Rica. It is, I remember at one point had become 50% deforested. I'm not sure, maybe Diane.
30,
Yeah. And they have regained so much of that forest. And of course, once they made the effort, it does regenerate so quickly with the rain and warmth. But it's just amazing how much it's regained, and it's still on track for restoring a lot more forest.
Yeah. One thing I'll say on that is there's kind of that statistic is a little disputed. I thought about bringing that up. There has definitely been growth. It's unclear what the level of growth is and where it originally was. So I spoke to some experts who were kind of unclear on that. Um, one program that Costa Rica has, which is really interesting, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but is essentially a program where if you have land that is natural, is just like rainforest or whatever, and is uncultivated and is not being used for crops or animals, you're actually able to get credit, financial credit from the government for that. And it's not a ton of money, but it's a little bit. And so, especially if you're already preserving this land for ecotourism, it's a little additional extra incentive for the kind of carbon sequestration that these forests provide.
From the times that we visited Costa Rica, we appreciate all they did on a government level and as teamwork between, partnerships between all these different agencies. But we've also been so impressed by what individuals have accomplished in Costa Rica. And we've visited multiple locations that had been like cattle farms. And then one owner came in and said, I'm going to have this be a wildlife refuge. And the way things grow in Costa Rica, you set it aside, you plant a few of the natives, and in 10 years, you're attracting, the animals and birds back. We were at places that had tapirs coming back. They didn't even think that tapirs would come back, but they just preserved the land and the tapirs showed up. And individual leadership, like in Tortuguero, there was kind of one man who started saving that beach where it's one of the hugest places in the world for sea turtle breeding. So, this inspires me that individuals can do a lot too, so we saw that.
And I will say, I think the potential for that also comes financially too. I think that, I guess I don't know the instances that you experienced. I also experienced similar things, and there was definitely a financial piece for that. People felt that they were able to make a profit off of it, and that's a good thing. It allows the prioritization of nature and also allows people's livelihoods to exist. Yeah.
For sure.
Simon, did you get any sense from I know you only had a few days with your host family, but I'm curious,
Yeah.
like what their perspective was
On tourists
around,
in general?
or biodiversity, sustainability, like how much it was a economic driver versus like a other cultural value.
I wouldn't actually say that it felt like it was a strong cultural value. I think I don't want to say that super firmly. I'm not certain. But for example, the idea, I feel like I encountered somebody who talked about poaching and that was just something like hunting. And that was something that was normalized to do. There's very few places, if any, there's very few places where hunting like that is allowed in Costa Rica. And that was definitely still something that was normalized for people in the community to do. So I don't think there was necessarily just this clear understanding of let's protect these natural spaces, though I do think there was a little bit of understand. I do think they understand that it's, I mean, it's the importance of it to a certain extent, and also the financial implications of it. I think tourism is really a main drive here, and they understand that it benefits their communities when they have tourists coming in to experience it.
It's Dawn. How are you doing?
Hi, Don.
Okay, this is the part that I don't get is
Mhm.
when you talk about people visiting or tourists, I always think of it as we're pumping money into their economy, but I'm guessing that's I want to hear what the negatives are
Mhm.
of tourism.
Well, there's a lot. I was recently reading something about this is actually kind of unrelated to Costa Rica, but how Amsterdam, for example, has many people coming in. It's a town of I think like 1 million people. Actually, I was surprised that there wasn't more people there. But they're actually having to put a cap on the amount of people that come into Amsterdam because the city is just overwhelmed. It can't support the number of people and the number of tourists that come in. And Monteverde was the same thing. So, for example, I heard stories of people who are having to move out of a city because the housing prices are too high. There's too many Airbnbs which have driven up costs, and it's not possible for lower income families to be able to still live in the city. They have to commute in. There's struggles of transportation. Costa Ricans can't get to the grocery store because there's too many tourists that are trying to drive to restaurants. Um, I would say I think the implications in cities is the biggest thing of the just kind of congestion that it provides and the draining of resources that yeah just kind of draining resources that a city has. Tourists put a stress on that.
Okay, so I'm thinking, like, is there a way to mitigate that? And how about traveling in the off season? Could that still support their economy but be less of a strain?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
actually a really good idea. I haven't consider that. I think oftentimes when we're traveling, it's kind of just like when do we have our time? I think traveling in the off season is a really good idea. In that regard, it allows a more consistent stream. So instead of a restaurant having to only employ their workers for 11 months, it allows them to be employed for 12. Um, yeah, I don't remember what the start of your question was, but
I just was wanting to find a way to travel and still put money in the economy, but without stressing them.
mhm. I think it also depends on the places we go. Um, there's some cities that are very full in a lot of ways, and understanding are we adding into that, or are we able to find a smaller area where we still have a similarly positive experience, but maybe with less people. There's a lot of beach towns now where it is just Costa Ricans no longer are able to live there. They've all been bought out by Americans, and there's condos, and people come and live for a couple months in the summer or it's a timeshare or whatever. And so understanding are we going into towns like that where we're really based on um well where the community has been pushed out by Americans, or are we going into a place where Americans are still adding in and are still being a net positive versus just kind of adding additional stress?
Would property ownership be pretty much always a negative then for foreign property ownership? I mean, would it be better to just go and rent from, I mean, an Airbnb from a local? Is that a better way to do it? Or
Well, and one issue is there's now Airbnbs that are being owned by Americans, which is they're putting regulations in around that, but that's also a problem. I don't really see a time when property ownership, unless it's in a very kind of say you move to Costa Rica and you started you own property there, you're living there, and you're kind of working to support a local initiative. I would consider that positive property ownership. Aside from that, I think the stress that owning property there has on the kind of housing market would never be wouldn't be a positive thing, at least for Costa Ricans. It may be for us financially or for our experience. It's a much cheaper country, and as an American, we have power going there, and it's really cool to be in a place that's very like laid back and really chilled out, and being able to experience that's really cool. For Costa Ricans, I don't think that's really positive for us to own it though.
okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the way you eat when you're in other countries can make a big difference. If you eat locally, we talk about that here in the U.S. You do it even more so when you're traveling, and don't look for the imported foods or the fancy restaurants, but look where the local people go to eat and eat the things that are grown, which is very easy to do in Costa Rica because you're surrounded by beautiful fruit and vegetable markets and yeah, there's nice little local restaurants. If the local people are eating there, it's probably more sustainable.
That's a good point, Diane.
And my other concern was the pesticides. That's unbelievable. Is there both when you're traveling there and here, when we eat here, if we choose organic, is that at least supporting the lesser pesticides, do you think? Or, what can we do about that problem that's killing their lands?
Yeah, it's a big issue and not something I feel super knowledgeable about. I think my initial inclination is like pineapple is nice, but like realizing like that is like a main export for them, and the stress that it places on their natural ecosystem is in no way feels kind of important enough for it. My consumption of pineapple does not feel worth that stress. So I'm happy to just not really eat much pineapple. And if I ate an organic one rarely, that would be fine. So I think we can also just think about what we consume, and I think what you're saying about consuming organically is good. Though if everyone buys, it's not sustainable for also everyone to buy organic pineapples at the same scale. It takes more resources and it's slower. We have to let fields regenerate in different ways, and so there's also some just needing to consume less of something. I think is important to recognize as well.
That's a great point. That in fact, when we were there, Selah, didn't they the place we were at an ecotourist place for dinner, and they literally did not serve pineapple, right, Selah? Or it was, I'm pretty sure because of so in other words, that's something I can do here. Just like I eat less meat, I can eat less
Exactly.
pineapple. Yeah. Or avocados, right? In Mexico, that's hard on them, I think. You probably don't.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Simon, that pesticide thing, I'm wondering, it's interesting to think in like North Dakota, there's like
Yeah.
a couple of months out of the year that you need to use pesticides because the cold is a natural pesticide for most of the year. Where in Costa Rica, like it's a 24/7, 365 issue. And I wonder how much that plays into that. Yeah, they have more that I
Hmm.
mean, you see from the photos of the biodiversity, just stuff is just growing all the time. But I don't know if there's like a big rainy season and like how the cropping stuff goes. So I'm curious if that you know anything about that.
That's a great point. Not something that was brought up off of my initial thinking. We have, I think it was 2.5 kilograms is what the statistic was in the US and 22.5 in Costa Rica. So say we 3 months of the year we use pesticides in the US and 12 months of the year we use it in Costa Rica, that would only assume that we're maybe at 10. And it would still be double. That's just kind of some quick math of not quite sure. I think that's a good point. I also think it's also pretty intense. Um, but I didn't hear much more on that.
Any more questions? Okay. Mother's Day.
Hi, it's your mom.
Hi, Mama.
Thanks for your nice text this morning.
Yeah.
Since you're talking to your church family, any any thoughts about excuse me, how any thoughts about faith in Costa Rica, about the coming out of St. John from your experience and what your upbringing brought to you, your questions and your experience of Costa Rica, and yeah, just any reflection on that. And if not, that's fine. But
That's interesting. I guess I can't speak much towards religion in Costa Rica. I will say I think I've always felt a connection to the natural world, and that also feels connected to faith. And I think sometimes it feels like we remove. I haven't really felt I haven't heard much in my kind of faith teaching before about how we can understand natural experiences as part of faith, and that's something that I've kind of worked. I feel a connection to those both things, and I think being in Costa Rica, there was you're kind of in awe of the natural beauty. And I also feel a connection to a higher power in that. So maybe in that way, I think.
Cool.
So this is Dennis again. So I heard you were especially struck by your month in Japan, and maybe that wasn't about sustainability, but could you just share a few things about your experiences in Japan?
Sure. Yes, I did. I didn't really do anything related to sustainability in Japan, though I am familiar they've made some changes. I um hmm. I think the way that the biggest thing that stuck out to me from Japan is a concept called wa, which is this idea of kind of collective well-being and thinking about the collective before ourself. And I think that's interesting in a lot of ways in our world today. But the way that Japanese people would go throughout um, public spaces was very different and very conscientious of others in ways that we're talking in spaces. How much space we take up is just very different. And I think coming back to the US, I realized how much space we're comfortable taking up just in our society. And in Japan, that's very different. And I think it's interesting to think about how that does connect to sustainability and understanding um, when we have a collective understanding and a collective focus on well-being, a focus on collective well-being versus personal well-being, it also allows us to prioritize aspects of sustainability.
Okay, excellent. That's just a great point. I don't suppose you want to share that little video song that you guys made?
I don't know where it would take some time to find it.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, sorry.
Is it on Facebook, St. John Friends?
Oh, it is?
You know, could we share it that time?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. You'll do that? Yeah, how would I do that? Send it to me, I'll put it on there. Okay. So Jeremy, look at St. John Friends in the next week or so with the video silent, and some students made a video or a song. Appreciate that.
Right.
Okay, anybody else? Simon, thank you a million for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
And have a great day and happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day, everyone. I was glad to talk, and I hope it provided a little insight into how I think about traveling in a place sustainably and how we can kind of think about that ourselves in our it kind of being intentional about our travel and what that looks like in different areas.
Thank you.
Of course.
Bye. Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Cool. I love the question because that ended on.
Oh, that was great. That's a great way to actually.
Well, you were the one who asked them that question. How did you phrase it? I mean, not today. I mean, another time you.
Different time.